This is video 2 on different types of solutions. We're going to be talking about saturated solutions, unsaturated solutions, and something called a supersaturated solution in this video. So hopefully by the end of this video you should understand those terms. Now, the first thing I want you to do actually in your packet is there is not a space for you to write this, so maybe in the margin, if you can find room, I want you to copy down this definition for solubility. We can measure, we can actually find the solubility of a substance, just like we could find the density of the substance or something like that. And basically what solubility is, it's just the amount of solute, usually measured in grams, that can dissolve in a given amount of solvent, usually in milliliters or liters, for a specific set of conditions, like temperature and pressure. So we could look up the solubility. We could look up how many grams of NaCl would dissolve in 100 milliliters of water, for example. And it would vary depending on temperature. Now I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about all these other terms. So the first term is something called saturated. So a saturated solution is a solution that contains the maximum amount of dissolved solute based on the solubility. So for example, if we say a solution can only hold 35 grams of a solute in 100 milliliters of water, for example, then that solution has 35 grams at least, if not more. And if we were to add any additional solute, it would just fall to the bottom and not dissolve. So a saturated solution is holding as much solute as it and dissolved as much solute as it already can. Now, an unsaturated solution should be fairly easy to figure out then. An unsaturated solution is a solution that contains less dissolved solute than the saturated solution under the existing conditions. So if we use that example of a solubility being, say, 35 grams per milliliter, I made up that number. If it's containing less dissolved solute than that 35, then it's unsaturated. And so if we were to add more solute, then it should dissolve and fall to the bottom. Now, I'm going to use an example from everyday life to try to make sure you understand this. Picture yourself having cereal for breakfast one morning, and let's say it's maybe Rice Krispies or Corn Flakes or Cheerios that's unsweetened, and you want to add sugar to it. So you put your cereal in the bowl, you add your milk, and then you sprinkle a little sugar on it. Now, if you sprinkle just a little sugar on it, that sugar should go into the milk and dissolve, and at that point, that solution is unsaturated. So you could dissolve more sugar in it, and so you usually add another spoonful of it. But at some point, the milk that you've got in your bowl can't dissolve any more sugar, and you get a sludge of sugar at the bottom of the bowl, and some kids really like that. At that point, when that sludge starts to form, the milk can't dissolve any more sugar, and we would consider it to be saturated. Any additional sugar we add is just going to fall to the bottom of the bowl in that sludge. Okay? So unsaturated means it could always dissolve more, and saturated means it's dissolved as much as it can. So what then is supersaturated? Well, a supersaturated solution is going to be a solution that contains more dissolved solute than a saturated solution. So how can we get it to contain more dissolved solute? We're not talking about the sludge at the bottom. We're talking about every piece of it is dissolved actually. So usually what this involves is heating a solution to get it to dissolve more solid, and then we're going to cool it back to the original temperature and not disturb it, but we're not going to bump it, we're not going to shake it, and we're going to fool it into thinking that it's going to be able to keep that dissolved, and usually it does, but it is very unstable. That's why we don't want to bump it or jar it in any way. And if you add one single seed crystal, it will cause the excess solute to crystallize. So a good test would be if I gave you a solution and you didn't know if it was saturated or whether it was unsaturated or whether it was supersaturated. The only thing you know is that it is a solution. And let's say I tell you it's a solution of sugar in water, okay? We know that this is a sugar-water solution. How could you test to see whether it was saturated, unsaturated, or supersaturated? Well, I'll give you a hint. You should add one seed crystal So just one crystal is all you'd add. And think about what it would do if it were saturated. If it were saturated, what should it do? Going back to our definition, if it's saturated, it would not dissolve. So that seed crystal should just fall to the bottom and not do anything. If it's unsaturated, that seed crystal should dissolve. So that means our solution was unsaturated. And if it is supersaturated, it's going to do something unique. It's going to cause this entire thing to crystallize. And we're going to hopefully get a chance to see that in lab one of these days soon.